Um, and I am delighted to see you all here for this virtual Let's Talk. There's a lot to talk about these days, and we're glad that we have Zoom to bring us together even when we have to be apart. So, welcome. A couple of Zoom clues to make this presentation a little bit smoother. When we have this many people, it's best that almost everybody keep your audio off. You might also want to turn your video off. It depends on how much distraction you want to go for. Also, I've found that when you get to a big crowd like this and you have a couple of speakers, it's helpful for me to put my screen in speaker view instead of gallery view. That's up at the top right of your screen. Then you will see the speakers, you know, it'll change as different people speak, and then that face will be much, much bigger so that you'll be focused on the presenters instead of this lovely array of people. It's up to you, but in my case, that's what I'm going to do here in just a minute. We'll be taking questions tonight, and you can use your chat feature, which is at the bottom of the screen. You can see it says chat. It's got that little bubble like a cartoon dialogue bubble. And I will be watching the chat in case there are questions that we want to deal with immediately. Mostly we'll try to wait until until our speakers say, okay, now are there any questions? And they have promised that they will be willing to take questions at the end. We're going to go for about an hour, but they also said that, I don't know if they remember this, but they said they'd hang around a little bit longer if need be to get all the questions covered. So when a few of us got together a few weeks ago, virtually, of course, we realized that there are lots of things to talk about that are related to this topic of broad, intrinsic, systemic racism that is on the top of our agenda now, and I'm glad it's there. I'm glad we're thinking about it. And John Goldrich, who is here, there he is, wave John, who's been our host at Newman Methodist ever since we started this Let's Talk group, suggested that we should start by focusing tonight on voting. Voting rights, voter turnout, voter registration, mail-in voting, all that stuff. Because voting is such a fundamental right of citizenship. It's the first thing, right? And it's important that we learn about it and support it and promote it. So we are delighted to have with us tonight two people who know a lot about voting. Dave Shively, Lancaster County Election Commissioner. Can you raise your hand, Dave? Hi. And John Cartier from Civic Nebraska. John's going to be first on the program, and then he will introduce Dave later on with more information. So first, just a brief introduction to John. He's a graduate of the NU College of Law, and he has served as Civic Nebraska's Director of Voting Rights since 2017. In that role, he works to ensure that elections across the state are nonpartisan, accessible, and modern. Before he joined Civic Nebraska, John worked on several elections, including his own for Lincoln Public School Board of Education. He is a native of Las Vegas, but he saw the light and moved to Nebraska in 2010 when he joined Concordia University on a track and field scholarship and studied marketing and journalism there before going on to get his law degree. So we're so pleased that you're with us tonight. We have a couple, at least one other, Steve Smith, representative of Civic Nebraska, who's joined the conversation. And we'll turn it over to John and go from there. So welcome.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and it's a real pleasure to be here with everyone today. What a fine way to spend Monday night talking with some close friends about voting rights issues. I will get right started with it. I'm going to share my screen here and hit our PowerPoint presentation. Okay. Excellent. So again, I'm John Cartier, Director of Voting Rights for Civic Nebraska. We're an organization that was founded in 2008. It's a nonpartisan, not-for-profit 501c3. We are comprised of 3 program areas. The first is our Youth Civic Leadership Program. here we do really cool things like bring young adults and also new Americans to the Capitol to firsthand experience what we call Capitol Field Day experiences, where they interact with members of the legislature, executive branch. They do mock hearings. They'll attend a real hearing and testify. It's a very cool program. And the second one we have is our Civic Health program. This is where we serve over 1,000 children after school programs in Omaha and Lincoln. And then finally, we have Team Voting Rights. It's the one that I'm in charge of as Director of Voting Rights. And we're the only group in Nebraska that specializes in nonpartisan voting rights research, policy advocacy, observation, investigation, and litigation. And it's been a real pleasure to be able to go into this role. I started my career out doing title insurance as an attorney. There's nothing wrong with title insurance, great field, but it just wasn't a good fit for me. And it's been really excellent to be able to practice in this venue. So part one, we're going to focus our mind's eye on 4 main issues that we engage in. And we do a lot of our work primarily lobbying through the legislature. And what that really looks like is we get voting rights advocates who we have a network of over 1,400 throughout the state. We get them engaged in the process on the issues that they are interested in and care about. And these top 4 ones are some of the most popular in terms of the stuff and kinds of work that we do. As you can see, we're going to start off talking a little bit about voter ID. Second, vote by mail. Third, nonpartisan redistricting, and then end up with restoration of voting rights. Right into part one. So one of our, actually we were founded pretty much to go into the legislature and stop voter ID laws from passing in Nebraska. We've been really, really good at resisting that in our state. There's 3 things I wanted to talk to everybody about why we don't like voter ID and why we think that it's not a good choice for Nebraska. The first one right there, it's quite frankly, it's too expensive. We had a fiscal note for the 2017 voter ID bill come in at a $2.9 million setup cost, an annual cost of $750,000 after that. This would pay to print voter IDs, or free voter IDs that would go to people. And that's one way that we were able, the creators of that bill were able to circumvent one of the most strongest protections for voting rights in all state constitutions, and that's found in Nebraska Constitution. And it says that the election shall be free of impediment or hindrance, and basically you can't force people to participate in the elective franchise by paying money. So something similar to poll tax. And a voter ID, if you require it and people don't have a means of accessing one for free, well, then it's going to be in conflict with our Constitution. And another point to bring up under this bullet point is that proponents of voter ID legislation might have a leg to stand on if there had ever been a real issue with voter impersonation fraud in Nebraska, but that's just not the case. We look throughout all the decades of elections in Nebraska, and we have never had a single conviction of a voter impersonation fraud, period. So when we were thinking about implementing these large-scale bureaucratic government programs that are going to try and solve something for people, it should be tangible at least, and that just hasn't manifested in Nebraska. The second point is we think it unfairly targets vulnerable Nebraskans. So this includes rural seniors and voters with disabilities. These individuals, it's hard to go to places to be able to even take a picture, let alone go in and pay money out of your pocket in order to get an ID to be required to vote. It's something that we've been joined on our side with AARP, which is a really powerful ally to have on some of these issues, among a host of other organizations. So it is a pretty controversial piece of legislation. And the reality does show it will disenfranchise eligible voters. I included, it's hard to see at the bottom there, but there's some bullet points of various cases that have dealt with voter ID legislation and laws and challenges to it through the court system. And those wouldn't exist if there weren't people who were turned away who were otherwise eligible to vote in an election. There's plenty of examples to go through. We don't have time today to go through every single one, but Civic Nebraska, we have published a lot of reports and detailed a lot of the examples of why this would be a bad choice for Nebraskans. We're going to move right along to our second point, something a little bit more positive, and that is expand the use of vote by mail. I think we just saw case in point why the vote by mail option is such a great thing that's available to Nebraskan voters. This was able to help us put on an election during a deadly pandemic without really missing a step. And in fact, we set a participation record. So that's something to definitely think about. I'll go in a later slide talking about some of the statistics, what we saw from this previous primary election. And the things I wanted to bring up about expanding vote by mail. So the first part is right now, if a county wanted to switch to their elections to be conducted entirely through the vote by mail standard, that is every single registered voter would be automatically mailed a ballot in the mail to them. This is only available to counties with less than 10,000 inhabitants. And at first, there wasn't a lot of counties that have started doing this. But then in 2008, the first one, Garden County, switched over to an all vote by mail election. And since then, it seems like we're going to be slated to have anywhere from over 11 counties that are going to do an all vote by mail election standard for the general election. And we saw a lot of counties added to that total during this last primary. So it's been definitely trending upwards in terms of its use. We would prefer that option to be available to any county. I think we've seen it work, the all vote by mail elections in Douglas and Lancaster. There's kind of a quirky thing in election law where basically you can put on a special election through an all vote by mail standard. You just can't do one of the larger elections we're more familiar with. So that includes if anyone was in Lincoln recently during the bond initiative that went through, that was a special election conducted entirely through vote by mail, and the numbers were pretty big on as far as who participated. The next point I want to talk about, Secretary John Gale. I had the pleasure to overlap with him briefly during my first year, and he was a great guy to get to know and talk with about elections. And he put out a election system advisory task force report in 2017, and he said it himself in that report: the best long-term county-friendly and least expensive choice for Nebraska electoral future is to begin conversion to an all-mail election system. That is a quote in the report, and that's something that we agree with, and we work towards expanding its use in Nebraska. The benefits there: increases voter turnout, improves security, and long-term cost savings. A good example to look at the long-term cost savings is our friends in Colorado. They've been doing an all vote by mail elections for years now. And what's nice about it is you're able to get really good data about voters where they're registered to vote at. So that's supposed to be your residential address. And anytime you mail vote by mail ballots to voters to their houses, and for whatever reason, maybe they moved during that time period, or they're not around, or they're just never there to begin with, that ballot's going to get sent back, and that tells election officials a couple different things. One, the voter's probably not there anymore. Two, we got to update our records, and this is going to help us cut down waste as far as bad addresses on the voter rolls. And let me tell you, good data in elections is invaluable. I think Dave will be able to mimic that statement. And just real quick, the bill that would have reduced that 10,000 inhabitants was LB 163 that was introduced by Senator Megan Hunt. We weren't able to go anywhere, and the pandemic hit with that, so it's still kind of the back burner. Moving on, nonpartisan redistricting. Well, we think gerrymandering is bad for democracy. Voters should really be able to choose their representatives, not the other way around. This practice is a hallmark from the early 1800s when elected officials first discovered, well, we're able to take all this great redistricting data from the census and then recreate our legislative boundaries in such a weird way. It literally looks like a salamander. That's where the name gerrymandering came from. And the terms are cracking and packing. So it depends on where you are and what the demographics are of the electoral place where you're at. But sometimes you want to put certain voters in one block of a legislative district, another group of voters in a different block. And that's a way that representatives are able to kind of cheat the system really in a way to ensure that they're always in power. They're never going to get really any real challenges. And for us, we like people to be energized, go to the ballot box, and really have choices that they can decide from and be able to participate that way. There's a couple different ways that we can accomplish nonpartisan redistricting. Independent redistricting really just means we take it out of the hands of the legislature, which is where that is right now. So that's what we say when we don't really want politicians necessarily taking the lead on this issue. But there's other ways that we can do it. Some requirements for computer programs, publicizing every single step of the way that the legislature is doing the redistricting process. And then the last part I'll put there is we really want good census data. And Civic Nebraska, we're part of Nebraska Counts Coalition of nonprofits trying to get a complete count in the state. We need to be able to count where people live, to be able to draw good legislative boundaries. And so good census data is absolutely vital for a fair and nonpartisan redistricting process. At the bottom there, you can see a host of bills and things that have addressed various concerns from people on this. We haven't been able to pass anything yet, but we're hopeful. We're going to keep trying. Unfortunately, we're not going to have redistricting on the ballot this year due to COVID. That was something that kind of made it not a reality. But there's definitely hope in the future for Nebraska to be able to make some positive gains in this area. Next is the restoration of voting rights. So the current law in Nebraska is that we disenfranchise people who have already completed their sentences. We, from the time of someone's probation or parole, that they have to wait 2 years before they're eligible to register to vote and be able to participate again. It used to be a lifetime ban in Nebraska, and this type of restriction on people's rights is also something that originated from a really dark period of Nebraska's history, or not Nebraska, but just the whole United States' history in general. It is something that was implemented into state constitutions right around after the Civil War in a way to prevent African Americans from registering to vote. They would make up a whole host of ridiculous felonies that would only really apply to to black people over white people, and then target them that way to kick them off voter rolls. Part of the Jim Crow sort of laws that we saw, and it's something we don't think we should continue to punish people who've already completed their sentence. And research is backing up that democratic participation is in fact positively associated with rehabilitation. So this means that when we bring people back into society who we have locked up or given them a felony for various reasons, we want to be able to provide them all the tools possible that's going to lower the recidivism rate and make them feel more like a member of the community, because when people have real connections and feel invested in the community, they're less likely to commit crime and reoffend. There was no policy justification for the 2-year waiting period. This was an arbitrary number reached through political compromise. I want to make sure I get the right date in here. I think it was 2004 when the legislature was able to pass a bill. At first, it was going to get rid of the cap or going to get rid of the lifetime ban in general, but due to what happens at the Unicameral and anywhere else where there's lawmakers, there's negotiation, there's compromise, and that's how they settled on that 2-year number. There's real no public policy purpose being served by it. So we want to get rid of it. We want to restore people's rights who have already served their time and completed their sentences. LB 83, this was introduced by Senator Wayne that would have done so. Again, this hasn't passed, so we're still going to keep fighting. We actually did pass a bill that removed this, but unfortunately it was vetoed, and we did not have the votes to overcome the veto. But we will keep trying every year to make sure that we can restore voting rights to all our citizens. Next, so those are the big issues of policy that we deal with at Civic Nebraska. I want to get into part 2 here, voting during a pandemic. What we saw this last couple months was a monumental effort due to our amazing election officials and workers. Shout out to David Shively for sure in Lancaster County. I mean, it was really quite, frankly, incredible what they were able to do. There was an election that happened prior to us in Wisconsin, and it was pretty much a disaster. So I think the people in Nebraska, we were able to look to that and say that's not something we really want to engage in. We're able to get record amount of people to vote even during a pandemic, which is amazing. The previous record that we broke, as you see up there on the screen, was just just over 113,000. That was set in 1972, and we shattered that record. And you see why a huge contribution to that reason was because 383,000 people voted by mail. Was 78% of the total votes. One of the biggest contributors to that, thank you to the Secretary Bob Evnen and the election officials at the state level. They made the determination that they were able to send a voter card to every single registered voter, making it easier to vote at home. It was just, it was a postcard that came through the mail. It was super easy to fill out and then put back in the mail. And that was a big reason why so many people signed up to vote at home. There was another big public promotion around it. And Civic Nebraska, we also helped out doing that as best as we could through promotion of advertisements on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, trying to get the word out that it is an option for every single Nebraskan to request an absentee ballot to vote at home. You don't need an excuse. It's a really great tool. And down there at the bottom, civicnebraska.vote, that is our voter registration and portal. And it also helps people connect them to an absentee ballot when the period opens up again. And I suspect that they will let us know when those deadlines are, but it's coming up here in the beginning of July. Part 3, this is where we're going to get into a little bit of advocacy training and what we like to do at the Unicameral and make people's voices heard and a part of the process to help move pro-voter policies. I'm going to discuss real quickly an overview of the Unicameral and then get into an introduction of some of the advocacy tools and good tips that we can provide today. And then we'll conclude with questions, and that will be the end of my time with you all today, unless you want to have some good questions back and forth. So first part, let me take a drink of water before I keep talking. The first part, overview of the Unicameral. There is no place like Nebraska. We are the only Unicameral in the entire United States. That means that we have only one body where we have senators that conduct lawmaking. Typically, all the other states have, it's similar to like a House of Representatives and also a Senate, but not Nebraska. We have one legislature, 49 senators covering 93 counties. It's a lot of territory. And every single bill is treated special. And that reason is because every single bill gets a hearing. And these hearings are open to the public. And this is where we are really able to bring people down the Unicameral, tell lawmakers how they feel about an issue. And that's a great way to affect change and be able to put things in a positive direction. Or in the case of voter ID, and what we've been able to do every single time is, man, we jam-pack those hearings with people, and they really let people know, like, this is something that they don't agree with. It is controversial. It's something that's going to hurt members of our community, and it's not a good idea. The next thing here, we got some audio there. Okay. The next thing here is it's difficult to pass controversial legislation. The reason why is because there's a filibuster rule that requires 33 votes to overcome. So that's, super majority. It's really, really difficult to prove to the Speaker of the House that a bill is worth its merit if it can't get those 33 votes to overcome a filibuster, if it's something that's controversial. And then there's going to be, I believe it's either 13 or 17 senators who are going to stand up and filibuster it and make sure it doesn't move anywhere. Quick introduction now to advocacy tools, information, and talking points. What we like to do and encourage people is to find something that they're passionate about. Maybe voter ID is not something they're interested in. Maybe it's really the restoration of voting rights. Maybe they know somebody who's been through the criminal justice system, hasn't been able to vote, but They think that that's a ridiculous thing, and they're able to go to the unicameral, talk to their elected official in person through lobbying, and tell them, hey, I grew up in your neighborhood next to your mom, and we're connected this way, and this is how I feel. And you want to build relationships when you're dealing with members of the legislature and you're doing lobbying. The story that always comes to mind is another issue we do work on is constitutional convention. We were able to change a senator's mind because we brought in someone that they knew and was a friend and as familiar with their person and their background. And she was able to explain to the senator why they didn't believe in constitutional convention, why it's something they should stay away from. And that was the most persuasive thing that we could have done, because when I go to the legislature and testify in hearings and stuff, like, it's part of my job, I got to go do it. But that's not the most effective stuff. It's when all of you go out there and you go engage directly one-on-one with people and you let them know how you feel. That is the most powerful thing that any of us could be doing on any given day, as far as when we're trying to move pro-voter legislation or stop bad policies from going through. But if going in person is not your thing, there's a whole host of other things you can work with. You can pick a contact method and platform you're comfortable with. You can call senators, you can write them, you can email, lobby in person, you can write a letter to the editor. All these are really, really great things. And at Civic Nebraska, we, if you sign up to be a voting rights advocate, which we'll get to in a little bit, we will coach you one-on-one personally on how to do these things. We will connect you with all of our information, all of our talking points, and we'll craft a message. We'll do whatever it takes to make sure that you feel comfortable and you're willing to go and do good work for your fellow citizen. And what more else could you ask for, really? Now, an example script that we have here, this usually I do this presentation with our voting rights field director, Brad Christian Solis, and we'd read this back to each other. But I kept the slide in here just to show you how simple it is. It's not super complex. You don't need to include like 8-9 paragraphs of information. You can call up your senator's office. You talk to usually the legislative aide, and you let them, or their administrative aide rather, and you just say your name, you're a constituent of theirs. You want to urge a senator to stand up by supporting or opposing something, and then you pick 1 or 2 messages that really resonate with you, and then you get extra points if you're able to connect personally and put your own story into it and on why it's something that might affect you, a friend, a family member, you name it. And it's that easy, and it's a great thing that we're able to do. Now, with COVID-19, things have really, really changed as far as our strategy for stuff. At Civic Nebraska, we've always preferred to do one-on-one interactions, especially going door-to-door canvassing. We've had to throw out all that stuff at a really short amount of time, but we haven't let that stop us, and we've been able to increase our efficiency in a lot of areas, especially with our Nebraska Counts 2020 census, by sending out way more texts, way more calls to people. So that's something we're able to do and let you know how to do as well, and set you up with those resources. And one of them is something called OutreachCircle. It's kind of a portal, you can think of it as, where we get signed up and we'll post assignments that people can do and choose, and depending on what they want to do that day, they're able to do it. And it's just a good way for us to organize the work that needs to be done in the state. Why should you testify? Well, it's a chance for your voice to be heard by those who are making decisions. And when lawmakers are making and crafting policy, the number one priority or voice that should be in their ear, telling them what what direction they should be doing or what bills they should be writing, is we the people. It's not professionally paid, industries or lobbyists. Although those groups and individuals play a part too, but it's everyday people, citizens representing themselves, who go to the legislature and who want to talk about what's important to them. That is the stuff that can move mountains and change the heart and minds of a lot of people. And we like hearing day. It's I remember my own tracker. When I wake up on a hearing day, it feels like kind of like game day, right? It's a different air. You feel energized. You just feel ready to go. But it doesn't have to be this super intimidating, daunting thing. And quite frankly, from all the hearings I've watched, usually they're relaxed, they're funny, they're easy. It just takes that first awkwardness and maybe hesitation about going up in a setting where you're surrounded by all these really important people who are making decisions for us. But I know that Senator Brewer, the chairman of the Government, Military and Veteran Affairs Committee, he's a really good guy. He always makes a funny joke about me being an attorney because literally, most of us doing some of this work are attorneys. So it's a fun way to be able to connect with people that are making decisions for us. And if that's not something that sells you on it, your stance on supporting voting rights in particular will be recorded for all of history, or forever there's a written record, or us we're able to store information. Your words will be there. And on the reverse side, something I like to compare to that, when we're able to look at the words of senators and lawmakers who put in our Constitution that there should be a lifetime ban on felon voting, they say it themselves what the intention of that terrible policy was. It was to prevent African Americans from participating in elective franchise because we could just give them felonies, and that was it. And their words are recorded there, and we can all look now, hundreds or whatever years later, and say, they had it wrong. That was not right. That's not a good way to act to your fellow man. But now just think about in our situation, 50, 100 years later, we have our ancestor, grandkids, friends, or whatever, people looking at the words that we spoke about important election matters and important matters that affect the rights of all of us. And they can see that you try to be a positive change for your community and for humanity in general. And that's, I think, is a super cool thing to do, and to be able to take a look at when the hearing testimony is published. How do you testify? Well, we help you out with that as well. We send you alerts when bills are going through the Unicameral. We're out of session, of course, right now, but eventually we'll start back up. If you sign up to be a voting rights advocate, we will let you know that you can come in person. You can also send a letter or email to be added to the record now, and that's a good way to be able to make sure your voice is heard as well. At the beginning of your testimony, you're always going to state whether you support or oppose a bill, and you'll explain why you're in support or opposition. Keep it concise. Usually there's time period limit, 3 to 5 minutes for people, and then just enjoy it and stay relaxed. And it's a fun time. If you're worried about it, we'll practice with you and make sure you're feeling really comfortable. Now that's it. I think I did on time. I kept checking my watch, but I think I finished about 30 minutes there. I will now take any questions, unless we want to just go straight into the presentation by Dave Shively. And then I don't think I can see the comment box, so maybe Charlene, if you can see it. Yeah. Okay.
So far, the chat box is being occupied by Steve Smith, the communications director for Civic Nebraska, who has posted several comments about how you can go to the website to find lots of this information and more about becoming a voting rights advocate. If you just, there are obviously different parts of the website, but civicnebraska.org will get you to the home base, and then you can go from there. So if you look at your chat, you'll be able to see all the websites that Steve has put up, or you can just stick with the basic one there. Now, does anybody want to ask anything specific about John before we move on to Mr. Shively? Anybody have something to type into the chat? All right, I guess not. So then we will just move ahead and come back at the end for questions you might have thought of by that time.
Great. And I will just finish up by saying, if you want to be a voting rights advocate with us, it's fairly easy to go to our website and sign up. And again, our vote by mail and voter registration portal is civicnebraska.vote. Take a look at it. And thank you for your time today, everyone. Really appreciate being here. And I'm going to introduce Dave Shively. Here I have a statement to read. Dave Shively was first appointed in 1999 He is the first Lancaster County election commissioner to be appointed to more than 2 consecutive terms. He has brought a wide range of governmental, electoral, and organizational experience to the county elections commissioner's office. He's a native of Norfolk. Shively is a member of the Standards Board of the Federal Election Assistance Commission, which was mandated by the congressional passage of the Help America Act. And on a personal note, I've worked with Dave numerous times with my short tenure as Voting Rights Director, and he's a great guy to work with, super knowledgeable, and really happy to have him here today. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let him take it away. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, hey, I'm going to try to share my screen here, so let me coming up. We practiced this the other day. I thought it was going to work.
Down at the bottom of your screen, the green box.
Oh, I see what I'm doing. Here we go. Have it now, I believe.
Yep. We got
Okay,
it.
very good. Technology is not my best thing, but on computers. But anyway, well, I really do appreciate it, and thank you, John, for your kind words. And I know we worked together on several things regarding election law, and sometimes we don't always agree, but we try to work together for what's best for Nebraskans. So I appreciate that. I've been, as John said, I've been election commissioner for now 21 years, and the time has gone by very fast. And I feel very privileged to have been able to serve as your election commissioner for that time. And it's hard to believe that it's been that many years, but it has. But I'm going to talk a little bit about. My presentation is going to be about how to register to vote, voter registration rules, talk a little bit about turnout and early voting, and give you a little bit of idea of how things happen here in Lancaster County. Just briefly, our office was established here in Lancaster County on September 7th of 1947, and my assumption is that there was a change in state law at the time, and usually 90 days after the legislature finishes, that's when those laws goes into effect, and usually that's in September. Our office is first located at the terminal building down at 10th and O Street, and then we were located when they built the new city county building, that middle building that's down there now. We were on the lower level of that. And then they moved the office across the street to 555 South 9th Street, which is now a fitness center that Aging Partners uses. And then in 2001, that was 2 years after I became election commissioner, the county board decided they wanted to get us, they were actually going to tear that old building down and make a parking lot, which didn't happen, but they wanted to get us located to a more central location. And a building became available out where we would share the parking lot with the county treasurer's Department of Motor Vehicles. And so we moved out there in 2001. And I think we're very conveniently located and centrally located for most voters of Lancaster County. Election commissioners in Nebraska and county, currently state law has in counties having a population of over 100,000, election commissioners are appointed by the governor to serve 4-year terms. And so this includes the counties of Douglas, Lancaster, and Sarpy. And for those of you who are not, Douglas is the Omaha area, and Sarpy is the Bellevue Papillion area, the Omaha metro area. So those are the only 3 counties that they're actually appointed by the governor. And in addition to that, and I don't have this on the screen, I'm required to appoint a chief deputy election commissioner of a different political party to serve that same time as I have. And the list, I can't just find anybody that's of a different political party. The list has to come from, I get a list from all the recognized parties in Nebraska, and they have to give me at least 3 names. And then I make the selection for that. And our current chief deputy is Maura Kelly. Also in Nebraskan counties that have a population between 20,000 and 100,000, county boards of supervisors or commissioners may appoint an election commissioner. And currently there's only 4 counties that do that, a separate office, and that's Hall, which is Grand Island area, Buffalo, which is the Kearney area, Platte, which is the Columbus area, and Cass County, which is the Plattsmouth area, are the only counties that do that. In the other 86 counties in Nebraska, the elected county clerk also serves as the election commissioner. Our responsibilities are really pretty simple. We conduct elections for federal, state, county, and local governments. We ensure compliance with state and federal election law. We maintain a voter registration database of all voters in the county. We recruit and train and motivate over 1,100 election board workers for election day. We locate polling locations for 199 precincts there in the county, and then we prepare ballots and supplies for each precinct. We provide for early voting, including military and overseas voting. And one thing we're going to get started here in the next few days is that we'll verify petition signatures on both local and statewide initiative, referendum, constitutional amendments, recall elections, city charter amendment, petition drives. And then we also maintain election history. We don't know how you voted, but we know that you did vote. So candidates and campaigns like to use that information when they're targeting their voters. So they do get that, can receive that type of information as well. We'll talk a little bit about voter registration in Nebraska. Who may register to vote? Anyone who will be 18 years of age or older on a general election day, which is the first Monday, which is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, which is November 3rd this year. So someone that was, if you would have been 17 on the primary, in January 1st, but you'll be 18 by November 3rd of this year, you could register to vote and vote in any election this year. So we certainly had 17-year-olds that voted both in the school bond election in February, and of course again in the May primary election. And I do find it interesting. I think I just saw a story that this is being pushed, I believe, in California. So I think they said there were 20-some states that already do this, but there are several states that don't do this. But I think the idea is that if you're going to be able to vote in November, you should be able to vote in the primary or any election earlier in the year. So that was kind of an interesting thing I just saw today, that I think it was California that was moving to do this. You have to be a United States citizen, of course, a resident of Nebraska, and John did talk about the felony conviction, but you've not been convicted of a felony, or if convicted, it has been 2 years since the completion of the sentence for the felony, including any parole terms. So let's say someone is serving a prison term now and is released and has a 2-year parole term. They have to wait till that parole term is completed, and then 2 years following that before they would be eligible to vote. And then also, which doesn't happen very often, this would have to be found by a court. They cannot have been found to be mentally incompetent. I always get a question a lot of who needs to re-register to vote, and anyone who has changed their address, changed their name, or wants to change their political party affiliation. So they may already be registered to vote here in Lancaster County, but if they've made a change in one way or another, they do need to update their voter registration with us as well. And one question I get asked really frequently is failure to vote in a previous election does not require re-registration. So if you miss voting in the primary election, you don't have to re-register. If everything's is the same, there hasn't been any change, there's no reason to re-register. Sometimes people think that you have to re-register before every election, and that's not the case. As long as you've not made any change, you don't need to re-register. Registering to vote, there are several ways to do that. Registering to vote by mail, there is the picture here, the graphic I have up here is a Nebraska voter registration application. We have those forms available on our website, and they are also available at most libraries, post offices, and other governmental offices. This is a real simple way to, used to be the simplest way to register to vote. You didn't have to come to our office. But we've made things a little bit even more simpler over the last several years. But you can print this off, mail it to our office, and we can update your registration. One of the big things, and Civic Nebraska pushed this too, but I also like to credit former Secretary of State John Gale's office who pushed this a few years ago, our online voter registration system, which is really very convenient for voters. As long as you have a Nebraska driver's license or state identification card, you can register to vote online. and we get probably, right now we're probably getting 40 to 50 a day, maybe. Well, probably not right now. 40 to 50 we'll get. We get through the DMV. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. We'll probably get 10 to 20 of these a day right now. As we get closer to the election, there'll be some days we'll come in and we might have 800 or 900 on the system. So we get quite a few on them. Many of them are duplicates. People that Facebook says, hey, it's time to register to vote, and they'll click on the button, they go through the whole process, and they're currently registered. So we would hope that someday maybe we can find a way to reduce those duplicates. The one thing is that when you register to vote online, it's not live. So if you register to vote, you go on, you do the online thing. We're not going to get that registration until tomorrow. And if you do it today, we're not going to get it until tomorrow. And we have to go through each one individually to make sure that the address meets all of our address requirements and everything. So a lot of times we'll get 3 or 4 because people will do it, then they go to check to see if it was updated, and it wasn't, so they keep going back and forth. So that's one correction we would like to try to make somewhere down the line, is to reduce the number of duplicate applications we get with the online. But it's been a very successful program for us, being able to register online on that. Of course, you can also come to our election office and register to vote in person. Here's a picture of our office. We're located at 601 North 46th Street. Our office looks a little bit different than the way the gentleman's there is now, is we have plexiglass everywhere because of the COVID, but we are open to the public right now, and so people can come and register to vote in person at our office. You can also register to vote in conjunction when you're obtaining or renewing your Nebraska driver's license or state identification card. You can do that in person. Right now, I believe the DMV is only allowing, they aren't allowing driver's license renewals, personal driver's license renewals at the site across the parking lot from us. They're only doing plates and titles and registration over there. But the one on West O, you can get your driver's license out there, from what I understand, unless they've changed that in the last few days. You can also update your driver's license online, and they have a way to do that online, and you can register to vote in conjunction with that as well. Also, the part of registering to vote when you get your driver's license was all part of the National Voter Registration Act of it was in the 1990s. It was more commonly known as the Motor Voter Act, to register to vote in conjunction with getting your driver's license, but it also allowed for being able to register to vote in conjunction when applying for different types of government assistance. If you look at this is just kind of interesting to note here, the total number of registered voters in Lancaster County since 2004. If you look at this, it's constantly gone up, and you see a pretty dramatic increase there from 2014 to 2016. That was kind of in conjunction when we started our online voter registration program, and so it's gone up. Here in Lancaster County has gone up consistently over the last several years. This is something too I think you'll find a little bit interesting, history of political party registration breakdown between 2004 and the general election 2018. Kind of interesting that if you look at the red is the Republicans, the blue is the Democrats. They're kind of maintain a consistent number there, but if you look at the number of nonpartisans, which is in black, it's gone up almost 12,000 registered voters in that same time period. Of course, the Libertarian Party has been a little bit more active here in Lancaster County recently, and so we've seen a little bit of growth in the Libertarian Party as well. We do have 199 voting precincts in Lancaster County, and Lancaster County is a large geographical area for the eastern part of Nebraska. When you look at it, of course, when you get in the western part of the state, you'll see some larger counties. But in the eastern part of the state, Lancaster County, I think we have about 810 square miles or something like that. But I break it down when I look at things by the city of Lincoln and then the area outside the city of Lincoln. Of course, Lincoln's right in the heart of the county. We have I can't remember, about 175, 176 voting precincts in the city of Lincoln, and the remainder are outside the city of Lincoln. Ballots are, when you get your ballot on election day, they are specific to each precinct, and depending on political subdivision districts and or sub-districts, like legislative districts, Southeast Community College subdivisions, sub-districts, the Lower Platte South Natural Resources District. So they're specific to that, the area you're in, you're going to get those races on there. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that we do rotate candidates' names for most races. In a primary election, candidates' names are rotated by precinct. So not the same person is listed first on every ballot. In the general election, it's a little bit different regarding partisan races. Candidates are in the order on partisan races, and those would be like president, United States Senate, Congress, governor, all the statewide offices, all the county offices. The candidates are listed in the order of the political party polling the highest number of votes at the last general election. For governor, listed first, followed by the party second, and so forth. So since Governor Ricketts is a Republican, Republicans will be listed first, Democrats second, because they received the second number, Libertarians next, and then so forth. So that's how ballots are determined and how the rotation is. For all the nonpartisan offices in the general election, they are rotated by office. So for instance, the state legislature, candidate A will be, and the first precinct in order that they appear will be listed first, and then the next precinct, then the candidate B would be up on the top there. So they are rotated by precinct. Each precinct is staffed by 5 poll workers. That's what we work for. Sometimes we'll have a 1 or 2 more serving, depending on the size of the precinct and the number of turnout we expect for that precinct. But there's an inspector who's the supervisor of the precinct, and there's 2 clerks. Those are basically responsible for checking in and signing in the voters, and they must be of different political party affiliations. You have the 2 judges. The 2 judges are responsible for issuing the ballots and receiving the ballots back. The compensation varies, but it starts at minimum wage. And then once appointed, Nebraska law does protect poll workers in a similar manner as serving on jury duty. So if we appoint you as a poll worker, your employer can't force you to take vacation time. They have to continue to pay you. The only thing they could deduct is the amount that we paid you per hour while you were working as a poll worker. So if we're paying you $9 an hour and you've got a $15 an hour job, your employer would still have to pay you $6 during that time. We always encourage people that are interested in being a poll worker. We could always use more people to do that. We're constantly recruiting. You can contact our office. We do have a form on our website. We'd love to have more people volunteer to be poll workers. Qualifications, to be a poll worker, you must be a registered voter in Lancaster County, able to read and write English, must attend a poll worker training prior to each statewide election. Of course, you can't be a candidate appearing on the ballot. You must have good eyesight and hearing, and ability to work from approximately 7 a.m. to approximately 8:30 on election day. And sometimes that could go till 9 o'clock, particularly a statewide general election very easily could go a little bit later than that. This is a voter turnout between primary and general elections since 2004. You can see, I get asked frequently, Dave, what do you project turnout's going to be for this presidential election? Well, if you look right here, if you look at 2004, 2008, 2012, and 2016, you'll see we were anywhere between 70 and 73%. And if history's in line, I would be probably somewhere in that range, maybe hopefully a little bit higher, but that would be my guess. That seems where we normally end up in a presidential general election. One thing you'll notice here, that is, there's only one election that we ever had since this time that we've had more people vote in a primary than we did in a primary election. That was 2010. And if you'll remember, in 2010, the Pinnacle Bank Arena issue was on the ballot at that time. and in the primary election. And so there's a big push to get people out to vote. And we actually had more people vote in the primary than we did in the general election in 2010. This is just looking at the City of Lincoln municipal elections that we have in the odd numbered years, in April and May of the odd numbered years, and quite a difference there, isn't it, between statewide general elections and the City of Lincoln primary elections. And I always find this very interesting, is that local elections deal with us more on a local level, and you'd think more people would actually want to vote in those city elections, but it isn't the case. I wish those numbers would be higher. It takes the same amount of work to set up a City of Lincoln election for a 30% turnout as it does for a state election where we get 70% turnout. Basically about the same amount of work. We have to set it up the same way. I find this from a little interesting from the 2018 election, registered voters by age group, and then who actually voted. And I like to look at it in the piece of the pie there, but the yellow or the gold is people that are age 66 or older. It's about not too far off there. It's about the same in each piece there. But look at the blue, which is people in the age group of 18 to 24. Have almost in 2018 we had almost 21,000 people, voters registered to vote in that age group, and a little over 7,800 actually voted. So they have certainly a smaller piece of the pie there down to it. But I always tell young people when I go to vote, what group of people do you think candidates are going to make their attention on? They're going to take the people that they know that are going to vote, and and you can see that played out here pretty well. The people in that age group, 66 plus, and even age 45 and above, you start looking at it too, you know that they're going to vote. So there's actually a block out there that if they would just get out to vote, could probably make a lot of difference in the world with elections. This is the May 12th, 2020 primary election and how turnout was for that, and broken down by political party. We had just under a 42% turnout. A couple thousand more Republicans than Democrats voted, but the Democratic turnout was higher than the Republican turnout. And if you look down at the bottom, we had a little over 81,000 people vote. The difference between election day and early vote, about 1 in every 7 people that voted early. Voted on election day compared to early vote. The one thing and I'll talk here in a minute about a little bit more about early voting, but provisional voting is people that go to their polling place on election day, and for some reason they're not listed in the book, but they should be voting in that precinct. They're currently registered to vote. They vote provisionally, which means we can't count that ballot till we've verified that they've met all the, if they were currently registered, they didn't vote any other way, and so they were able to vote provisionally. Early voting, and as John said earlier, any Nebraska law allows any registered voter to vote early. That happened in the legislative session of 1999. It was right before I started, and I started on August 18th of 99, and on October 6th we had a school bond election for Lincoln Public Schools, and it was the first time we started to see a pretty dramatic more people starting to vote early because they didn't have to give us a reason. Prior to 1999, we had a list on the application that gave about 6 or 7, 8 reasons that you could select, and I think there was even another. So you could come up with about, we basically had any no excuse voting, because you could probably find a reason in one of those reasons to do it. But the legislature took that off in 1999, and we've just kind of seen a steady increase ever since. Military and overseas voting is very important for us, and we always want to make sure that our military people that are overseas, as well as anyone else that's living overseas, that they get the opportunity to vote. And we really have a push on that, both federally and through the state. But that actually begins 45 days prior to election day. And ballots for military and overseas voters may be emailed to the voters, and many of those that are serving overseas do receive them that way. And with special permission from the Secretary of State, they can actually email the ballot back to us. So they do have to sign a statement basically saying that they understand that they take some privacy away from their ballot. But this is a very easy and convenient way for them to get their ballot back to us in a timely manner. Early voting ballots by mail will be mailed starting 35 days prior to election day for statewide elections, and 15 days prior to election day for City of Lincoln elections. And the last day that we may mail ballots to a mail ballot, early vote ballots, is the second Friday before an election. And then we also, although we didn't do this in the primary election because of COVID, we had a special order that did not allow in-person early voting, but that does begin at the election office 30 days prior to a statewide election, and then 15 days prior to the City of Lincoln elections. And they may come to vote in person at our office up until 5 o'clock the Monday prior to the election. This shows you a little bit dramatic here from 2004 to what we had in 2018. The percent of people at a statewide general election have voted that voted early. We went from 16% in 2004 to just over 29% in 2018. Pretty dramatic increase over the years. We learned how to do this in a timely manner, and something that, you know, it's taken us some time to develop a good process, but I think we have a pretty good process here in Lancaster County, and all the counties in the state, I believe, do too. Our ballots are tabulated on the machine there on the left. It's a DS850 vote tabulating machine. It is made by a company out of Omaha called Election Systems and Software. They're our vendor. They've been the vendor for our vote tabulating services since I first came to Nebraska, or came to Lancaster County. Prior to that, we were one of the company. They weren't called Election Systems and Software at the time, but we were one of their original customers back in the mid 1980s when we bought a couple of their vote tabulating machines here in Lancaster County, and the development of those machines has just increased over the years. Really need to thank Secretary of State Bob Evnen for his push and work on getting these new machines. We purchased, the state purchased new vote tabulating machines for us after the last legislative session a year ago, included money to buy new vote tabulating machines, and we got 5 of these machines, and we already had one purchase that the county had purchased. So it was really a good investment for us, and hopefully it'll allow us to tabulate ballots in a timely manner and quickly. The machine on the left, and it's not a very good picture of it, but we do have at every polling site, with the passage of the Help America Vote Act in 2002, we were required to have a machine in every precinct that allows a voter with disabilities to be able to vote in private and unassisted. And up until this last year, we had a much heavier, about a 70-pound machine that we had to haul to all the polling sites and get set up. This machine is about 25 to 30 pounds, and it sits on a tabletop. It's called an express vote, but it allows a voter who is disabled to be able to vote in private and unassisted. With that, I appreciate the time being here, and be happy to answer any questions you have as well.
Don't see any questions well, there was one question that came up in the box about, is there a way to check online if you're already registered? And our friend Steve Smith has an answer. Would you like to talk about that too?
Yeah, our voter view system, we have a link on that on our website, and as well as the Secretary of State's office has it, that you can actually type in your information, and it'll tell you whether you're registered to vote or not. The issue is, for privacy concerns, it won't tell you what address you're currently registered to vote at, but it'll tell you your party affiliation, you know, and then if it's the area, it'll list your various political subdivisions, what legislative district you're in, what city council district you're in, and so forth. You can also type it in by address, and it'll tell you all that same information as well.
Excellent. A question through Facebook here. How can I volunteer to work the polls on election day?
We on our website is lancaster.ne.gov/election. We do have a poll worker application on our website, and you can fill it out and mail it into our office. If you don't have access to the internet, if you call our office at 402-441-7311, we can mail you one of those applications out as well.
Excellent. What's the best way you think? And John Cartier, you can chime in here too. John Goldrich asks, what's the best way to get young people involved and move them from being registered to actually voting? Do you have any insights on that?
Well, I always say peers are your best indication. You know, I always look back when I was in college, and you know, friends were doing it, you did it as well. So it takes the right person with anything. And I think voting is habitual. Once you start voting, you're going to do it. I think there's always like maybe some you know, if you haven't done it before, like with many things, that you might have a little, you know, what do I do when I walk in the door? A little bit apprehension about it. But once you start voting, whether you do it by mail or in person, I think people really get into that habit of doing it, especially if they, you know, they get past that first or second election. It's habit forming in some ways. You know, there's been a variety of things done over the years, you know, with you'd think that would help with turnout. Lincoln Public Schools has a really good program on student vote that they go through, and they try to teach at all levels. They do it, you know, grade school all the way up. They do it a little differently with each one, but it's been always, I always felt it was a very good program, and I always find it interesting to see the vote totals after the election, and then compared to what happens on election day here in Lincoln. But I think those programs are good too. But I do think you know, you've got to find the right people that encourages the other people to do it. And I think they're going to be more apt to do that with peers their own age.
Okay, John Cartier, are you down? I keep seeing your avatar and then your real face. There you are. Do you have anything to add about getting young people to vote?
Yeah, sure. I think Dave covered it pretty good there. The research definitely shows, I believe the statistic is if you vote in 2-3 consecutive elections, you're pretty much guaranteed to become a lifelong voter. So what we really want to do to get young people engaged in the process is kind of similar to the advocacy talking points early. We need to level on them on a one-on-one individual basis and find the thing that gets them engaged and excited, and tell them that this is absolutely affected by you know, who you elect into office. And the last thing I'll just say is that I think the direction towards making voting more accessible for people in the modern day, so voting by mail, is going to drastically increase the amount of people who are voting overall, and that's, you know, also going to increase the amount of voters who are in those younger age demographics. But one of the more interesting proposals we've looked into is actually lowering the voting age to 16 for municipal and statewide elections. We can't do it for federal ones, but that's something that hasn't gained a lot of traction yet. But again, if we're talking about making lifelong voters, earlier we do it, and we can intersect that education they're getting in maybe their civics or history class with them actually going to be able to out and vote. Those are all things I think that will help in the long run. So good question.
Excuse me. We've got a question here too about is there a way to get more people to vote in the primary? Obviously the general election seems to draw more voters. Any ideas about that? Either one of you.
Well, I always say what encourages people to vote is what's on the ballot. And over the years, we've actually taken races off the primary ballot and automatically advance some races to the general election because there's only one or two people that have filed for office. So getting more people to file in the primary for office, I think certainly would help. I mean, I don't have anything against the idea that if we only have one or two that we have, they automatically advance, but the more people you get on the ballot certainly encourages more people to vote, because of course people have friends, and that makes those races competitive in a primary election. So that would be, I just wish we could get more people to actually file. Too, if we would put more, sometimes be able to have some more issues on the ballot. I know there were a couple city election. We had a city charter amendments on the ballot this time, but those aren't really that exciting for people. They were pretty generic charter amendments. But in Waverly and Roca and Davie here in Lancaster County, we did have a sales tax issue on the ballot here in the primary election, and I didn't really compare what their turnouts were. I should probably go in and do that and see if their turnouts were a little bit higher, because they had issues on their ballots for those. But that's certainly, what's on the ballots is what's going to generate turnout.
All right. How about, are there any polling sites on college campuses? Would that increase, someone's asking, would that increase college age voting?
Actually, we, several years ago, is one of the things that early on, and I became election commissioner and had a group of students from university approach me, because we had the polling location on university campus, was at the Devaney Center, and we did move it to the, we moved it to the student union, and that has certainly helped. And so we tried to just isolate, eventually that it would just be the campus, residence halls, and sororities and fraternities. So it's really good in a statewide general election or a presidential election. They have a big turnout. Then we get to the city elections, and we might have about 10 or less people that actually vote there at that precinct. So yes, we do. And we also have, although we also have a place at Wesleyan campus at McDonald Theater, Union College. They vote at the Seventh-day Adventist Church that's right across the street, so it's fairly close to Union College. We do have a polling location at Southeast Community College, but they're a very mobile population. I don't think they have a residence hall there or anything. It's mostly for residents in the vicinity. So yes, we really have tried to do that to make sure that students there are. And of course, students are kind of unique when they're in college. They have the ability, they may want to stay and vote early absentee from their home address as well, because in many ways they know the local candidates and everything, so they'll request an absentee ballot. So when they register to vote on if they're at the university, they may not know the local politics, but they have that right to do it either way.
We've got several people in the chat have provided access or ideas for resources. And since we are kind of running a little bit late here, I'm going to say that you should take a look at your chat to find these websites and suggestions. And John Goldrich asks, do you have any suggestions for the best way to get marginalized individuals to the polls to vote? I'm thinking he's talking about low-income people, people of color, perhaps, people who are often at the margins in our society. What's been done in terms of procedures, policies to help encourage them to vote? Either one of you.
I can jump into that,
John.
one. Yeah, sure. So that's a really important question, and that's something at Civic Nebraska we work tirelessly on trying to improve. Some things we've done in the past is hand out information in homeless shelters, food food banks. Really, there is no one-size-fits-all solution for when we're talking about people who really live on kind of the outskirts of our society, and often, as you said, are marginalized and overall are just, for whatever different reason, face so many different obstacles to be able to even be at that place where on election day they're going to have all the tools and information ready so they even know how to vote, where to vote, when to vote. What we found with our Census Nebraska Counts campaign, we did do before COVID-19 put it off on the back burner, really, was that door-to-door, face-to-face interaction with people, and the stories from our canvassers and then the people in the census tracts that we were at who were rated as the most likely in the entire state to not even respond to the census survey. This population completely overlaps with who we're talking about now. That's something we need to keep doing a better job. We need to keep reaching out to our community partners, for one. Super important is trusted messengers. If I show up at the doorstep of someone who has no idea who I am, and I'm trying to, ask them for their information and to fill out a voter registration form, and trust me, I'm not, this is information I'm going to help you out with. That's not going to go very far for someone who's been through a great ordeal and is not going to trust people easily. So as best as we can find people within those communities to be the messengers, to go out, have those personal interactions and those conversations, reminding them that it is still an important element that you participate along with us, because we're all American, and our right to vote is something that we're able to all share together and should be able to exercise. And I'll let Dave if he has anything else, but it's a great question, and it's something that we all need to continue to improve all the time on.
Well, a job as election commissioner, we have to be so cautious what we do. If we try to do any one thing and trying to encourage any certain group to try to register to vote or actually vote, we can get accused of trying to manipulate everything. So it's really turnout. We have to make things available equally for everybody, and turnout, whether it's by political party or by marginalized groups or whatever, is really the responsibility of people within those groups. And it's really important that all those groups get out there and do their turnout. The last thing we want to do as an election official is to be accused of trying to really focus on one area, and then it turns out a result at the end that they were really pushed. So it's one thing I think we're really cautious on. People always ask me, how do we increase turnout? And for me, it's just I got to make sure everything works equally for everybody, and trying to make sure polling locations, our polling locations in lower income areas are usually closer for people to get to. When you get out into the edges of Lincoln, people have to travel several, Lancaster County some people have to travel several miles to get to a polling location, not several miles, but a few miles in some cases. So we just have to be very careful on what we do as election officials.
So obviously, mail-in ballots, mail-in votes were a major reason that our participation was so much higher in May. And I realized that the fact that we were all shut in at the time made that even more appealing. But if somebody voted by mail this past time, will they be asked automatically if they want to vote by mail again? Or do you have to, how do you contact people to ask them if they want to vote by mail?
Well, we are going, in Lancaster County, we are going to send out a card again to everybody. But we do have a list. We do have a list of voters that have told us they want to vote every election by mail. But Nebraska law does require us to have an assigned application in order for us to mail a ballot out to them. So on this card, there'll be a checkbox if they want to continue beyond that. We will mail that card. Our goal is towards the end of August. So we have plenty of time to get those back, and then we can get those first ballots out early on. I can't remember the exact day that they go out, but we will do that again. It'll look a little different than what we sent out this last time. It'll also tell them their polling location and if they want to vote at their polling location on election day as well.
Okay, so you can sign up to be a motor voter. A mail-in voter every time if you want to. You can sign up.
Right. You're right. And please understand that our permanent request form list is that you'll get the form. You still have to return the form back to us in order for us to mail you a ballot. We just won't automatically. People I know think sometimes that I hear the phone calls come in and say, no, you have to send that card in every time. They think that somehow we're going to automatically send them a ballot. And I know when we mailed everybody a ballot for the school bond election in February, that kind of confused people too. So, but we will continue to do that.
All right. Any other?
Can I say one thing? I think our permanent request form list has helped turn out, but I think it's also helped make a lot more people more 100% voters, or people that vote every election, and that's exciting. You know, it'd be interesting if I could really go back and look at percentages of how many people were 100% voters, you know, prior to this, and you know, now that that we're on the list, you know, people, it's just simpler for them.
Yes. Well, I'm really pleased to hear that you are going to send the notification to everybody again. I think that's wonderful. That'll be really helpful. Is there any other? Let's see. Steve Smith says, mail-in voting, a great way to participate in your democracy in sickness and in health, and in lockdowns or non-lockdowns. We want to increase participation, and this looks like a really promising avenue to do that. Anybody else have one more last question? Otherwise, we're going to say thank you so much to John and Dave for spending their time getting ready to talk to us and then making this presentation and answering our questions. And thank you for your work. Thank you for what you do, both of you. We really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody who attended, and keep your ears open for the next Let's Talk, which will probably be in about a month, and we will be getting some information out to you pretty soon. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.